The Bishop's Corner is a production of CTNY, the Catholic television network of the Diocese of Youngstown. It is a show highlighting the new evangelization called for by Pope Benedict XVI, who calls the Church to proclaim in word and deed the gospel of God to all people. Your host is Bishop George Murray, and your moderator is Father Jim Corda.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Bishop's Corner. I'm your moderator, Father Jim Corda.
And I'm Bishop George Murray. Welcome to our series on the new evangelization.
Our guest today is Father Greg Maturi, and we're going to talk about Catholic parishes. Father Greg, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much, Father Corda. Thank you, Bishop.
Welcome.
When we talk about Catholic parishes, and I'd like to begin with you, Bishop, Catholic parishes are really essential in the whole role and process of evangelization. That's kind of what brings about the kingdom, is the parish. How important is it for you, and we know theologically it's important for you, to kind of be the glue that unites all these parishes together?
One of the responsibilities of every bishop is to be a source of unity within the diocese. And the word diocese simply means a geographic organization of an area. And a bishop is appointed to be the chief pastor of a particular geographic area. In order for the bishop to be most effective, he appoints pastors who work in an even more distinct area to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ. Without those parishes, everything would be rather diffuse and not very, very effective. So our parishes, I think, when we talk about evangelization, there's much that we can do on the diocesan level, but the locus of evangelization, it seems to me, has to be the parish and the schools. Those two areas are the places where we have the most regular and direct contact with the people of God, and then oversight and long-term vision and planning would come from the diocese, but day-to-day interaction with people happens in the parishes.
And Father Greg, talk to us about your role as pastor, but also as prior at St. Dominic's.
Sure. So I'm pastor of St. Dominic's and prior of the religious community of Dominican fathers there at St. Dominic's. And as pastor, my role, as the bishop pointed out, both theologically and practically, is to help the bishop in his role as chief shepherd of the diocese. And any way we can help out the bishop, that's what we try to do. Now, with regards to being religious superior, as a Dominican priest, we live in community, and we have common meal, common prayer, we share common life. That's part of being in a religious community. And the head of that community is called a prior in the Dominican order. And so I serve both as pastor of St. Dominic's and prior of the Dominican community at St. Dominic's.
When we're talking about evangelization in Catholic parishes, I want to use the word cooperation. And how important is it for people in your parish to cooperate in order to be better evangelizers?
Cooperation is very important, and in fact, the bishop in his reconfiguration plan has put St. Dominic's and St. Patrick's together in a collaborative unit, and we work very well together. We share resources, we interact, and that's very helpful not only for the church because we share resources, but also for the community, because two hands working together is better than one, and so we cooperate very well in helping out the South to revitalize the South Side, which is so necessary.
And Bishop, what is your hope for the diocese in general, but for parishes in particular, especially as we're in this process of, or finishing this process of reconfiguration, but also in light of the new evangelization?
The goal, in my mind, is to have vibrant parishes. Parishes that are alive with the Word of God, parishes where people come to worship and that worship experience is uplifting and carries them through the week, parishes where education is going on so people are learning more and more about their faith, and parishes that are sensitive to and active in caring for the poor and for the needy. When you put those together, you have a vibrant parish, not a parish that's just holding on, not a parish that's slowly dying, but when you have a vibrant parish, it becomes a magnet. People want to be there. They want to be a part of that mission.
And I'd like to ask Father Greg specifically, what are some of the things that your parish in particular, but perhaps other parishes that you're aware of, basically are doing to promote and to foster evangelization?
Yeah, I like to talk about what we're doing as primary evangelization. In other words, just before one can talk about the Bible and explicitly about Jesus Christ, one needs to meet the needs of the community. On the south side of Youngstown, the needs of the community are obvious: crime and blight. And so we need to address those issues. And I refer to that as primary evangelization. They see a priest, they see the church out there helping them in real practical ways that affect their lives. So I began with a former mayor, Mayor Jay Williams, former mayor of Youngstown, Operation Redemption, in cooperation with the bishop and the diocese, a plan to remove blight, to make the neighborhood safer, to make it more beautiful. And this has helped to pave the way for further evangelization. So I call that primary evangelization.
When we're talking, Bishop, about parishes being kind of like the place where evangelization takes place, what happens when some of those parishes are no longer in existence? How does one continue, or how do neighboring parishes continue that whole work of evangelization?
Neighboring parishes invite parishes that no longer exist to come and join them. I think one of the best things about our reconfiguration plan was exactly what Father Maturi just mentioned, about parishes coming together and using the combined resources of the parishes to advance the goal. So when a parish unfortunately has to close, which is always a sad event, but it is a reality, at times that's necessary, it becomes extremely important that a neighboring parish that's going to remain open reaches out to those whose parish has closed and welcomes them and lets them know that they have a home at the new parish. Or if two parishes come together, and what often happens is they will form a new name so that they have a new identity. Then they actively work on bringing people together so that they are working in tandem to evangelize and promote the gospel.
We're coming down to the last minute of our first segment. Father Greg, I'd like you to comment briefly on that whole concept of go make disciples.
Yes, as a pastor, I'm acutely aware that I have responsibility for the souls not only of the Catholics in my geographical area, but of all people in my geographical area. And I seek to help and to reach out to all people as part of my helping the bishop to be the shepherd of all people in the diocese. And this is helping with the neighborhood, the needs of the neighborhood, and helping Catholics in my parish, members of my parish, bring them on board to help in the neighborhood too. That's very much a part of what I do.
Thank you for being with us. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show. We welcome Brian Sinchak, and we're going to talk about Catholic schools. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Bishop Murray.
When we talk about Catholic schools and evangelization, why and how important are Catholic schools in that whole role of evangelization?
Well, I think Catholic schools play a critical role in the evangelization, reaching young people and involving their families in the mission of Catholic education and the mission of the Church. Is a very helpful component in the Church's evangelization.
When we talk about mission, what exactly are we referring to when we say that the Catholic schools have a mission? What exactly would we be talking about?
Oh, I think that Catholic schools have a very definite, defined, and I would say exciting mission. And that mission is tied up with helping our students to come to know Jesus Christ and then to live their faith in the world. One of the most important things that we do in Catholic schools is not just to teach students what is best for them, but to teach them that they have a responsibility, because they have been so blessed by God, to use their gifts and talents for those in the world, and especially those who are less fortunate. And we do that in a variety of ways, by teaching them their faith in religion and theology classes. Also by teaching them academic subjects so they know about the world. But there's also service programs where they go out into the community, and they may go as far away as South and Central America. And I know that at John F. Kennedy High School, Brian takes a group to Central America every year. That's so those students can see the needs of people from outside of this area, and they can use their talents to help those people live a better life.
Brian, tell us specifically about some of those experiences.
At John F. Kennedy Catholic School, we have a tripod method of service. We have a local commitment to service with the St. Vincent de Paul Soup Kitchen, so our students understand the local needs of the community in which our school is situated. We also have national initiatives where students understand the needs of our American culture in different parts of the country. Students have traveled to New Orleans to help rebuild homes after the hurricane. And then we also have international outreach. Primarily at Kennedy, that's focused on South America and the country of Ecuador through a program known as Rostro de Cristo, the Face of Christ. There, students have the opportunity to work at a leprosy hospital and encounter this biblical disease that is still plaguing folks with who are living in these economically depressed areas, and also working in schools and orphanages in these areas. It really allows them to access the Catholic social teaching of our church and realize it in practice.
When the students are experiencing these particular service projects or whatever, do they see themselves as evangelizers?
I think so. I think they understand that their hands and their feet are the hands and feet of Christ. And as they encounter individuals throughout the world in their local, national, and international communities, I believe that they understand their role as spreading the gospel message of Christ.
We know that historically our Catholic parishes were built primarily for Catholics. Obviously, that is not the case nowadays all around the country. How important is it for us to be evangelizers to those who are non-Catholic within our Catholic system, and how do we do that?
Well, I think we do that mainly by exposure. I think that we invite people from a variety of religious backgrounds to come to our schools, and then we help them to understand what it is we believe. And then I believe that because of the way we live and the values that we identify, we say to others, this is how we see our faith, and we invite you to be a part of that. So I think we expose them to the doctrines of our church, but also to the way we live those doctrines, the way we live our faith. And then they must decide.
Let's say, and I don't want to talk about proselytizing, but let's talk about those who are not part of any formal religion or faith. How do you evangelize those to invite and encourage and perhaps welcome them into our church?
Well, I think academically in our classrooms, we expose them to the teaching of the church, and through academic study, introduce them to what it is we believe. But beyond that, I believe our schools provide an opportunity to have intentional Christian communities. And that communal aspect of what we do in schools, that familial atmosphere that we provide to our students and our parents, is the real invitation. For students to be able to have faculty mentors who care about not only their minds, but their hearts and their formation as young men and women, I think is the real invitation and the real draw to families who are interested or at least newly introduced to our church.
In the first segment, we talked about parishes cooperating. How are our schools cooperating in this whole role of evangelization?
Oh, I think there's a great deal of cooperation going on. Just earlier today, Brian and I were at a meeting with principals and presidents. And these meetings are ongoing so that the schools can share best practices in helping them to evangelize, and also can help to share activities that are going on for service projects throughout the diocese. So that conversation between the leadership of our schools, I think, is a key component there.
One of the concepts that I like to think about when we're in Catholic schools and as Catholics evangelizing is building up the human person. You know, that's our primary goal, is to make someone feel that they are important, that they're a child of God, they're the temple of God. How do you bring that about in the schools?
Well, one of the amazing and interesting parts of Bishop Murray's pastoral letter on education is that he focused in on the Jesuit philosophy of cura personalis, the care for the person, that this is a critical role that our schools must play in the education of our young men and women. I believe we do that with mentorship. Our teachers are not just instructors of a certain subject matter, but they are in charge of the formation of hearts and lives. So they cheer at their football games, they attend their spelling bees, they hold their hands of a child who has lost a family member, they pray with them in sacred space. That adult mentorship in the lives of children makes a difference. And I believe that's what separates our educational strategy from public education.
We have 1 minute before we close this segment. Bishop, what would you like to say to the schools in hope and in evangelization?
I would like to say, do not be afraid to reach out. Do not be afraid to share what makes our schools unique, and that is that they are centered on Christ and centered on the gospel. And everything that they do, every academic subject that a student takes, is to enable that student to come closer to Christ and to be a Christ in our world.
Brian, thank you for being with us. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show. Joining us now is Dr. Tom Brozich, and we're going to focus on generations of faith. Dr. Brozich, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Bishop.
Welcome.
If you could explain basically what generations of faith means and how we relate that in the whole role of evangelization.
The process of generations of faith was developed probably in the late 70s by John Roberto, and it has been active in our diocese probably a little over 10 years. And it's a process where the whole faith community is called to join together in faith formation, whereas the youngest to the senior members are to gather and dialogue, learn more about our faith. So it's a formation process that's ongoing, and it invites the parents to take a primary role as religious educator for their parents and passing on the faith. And we do that in a way in which everyone is involved, and it takes a lot of creativity and working together as a fuller community, and it has really helped bring us together as a group over the past 9 years our parish has had it now.
Usually we, in the past, many parishes still do CCD, where we have just the young kids come for faith formation and evangelization and learning about the truths. This whole process of inviting families together, how important has that been in promoting evangelization within your parish and within the life of the church?
I have found now that the families that are have a whole lot of demand on their schedules, and it's very difficult for them, but once they have chosen to be a part of this process, at first they said, gee, how can we fit that into our schedules? But making that commitment, they said, thank you for having us be a part in our family. We've taken energy and time for other aspects of their life, but we really haven't taken that time for our faith development. And once they are there with their children, and they learn as well in a separate component, because we gather as a large faith community first, pray, break bread together, have an opening dialogue about what the theme is for that particular day, break up into other particular groups that are age appropriate for further dialogue about that particular topic and subject. We come back, have a summary, sharing of what each of the groups have learned, and then closing with prayer in that process. And it's a connectedness where before the families may have not known specifically what their children were learning in the process, but they have had for their own level a revisit to that subject that they may have not had for a while.
And how often is it for us as Catholics that once we've celebrated a sacrament, whether it's First Communion or confirmation, oftentimes that religious education ceases. And so there's that sense, at least in generations of faith, in my experience as well, is that it's kind of a welcoming back those parents who may have stopped at a certain point in their faith growth and faith life, and how important that is. Bishop, in your experience of evangelization with families, how important is it to bring families together when we talk about evangelization?
Well, one of the things that I remind families of is that in the prayers for baptism, it says that the parents are going to be the first teachers of the child to be baptized, and we pray that they will be the child's best teachers. In order for them to be good teachers, they need to be active in their faith. They can't pass on something they don't have. So the method in Generations of Faith of bringing families together, I think, is a very strong method in terms of the faith going forward. The children see their parents involved in this process. The parents see their children who are in the process of learning. Together, they move forward. And I think that, at least in the parishes that I'm aware of where Generations of Faith is going on, there's an energy in that parish because of Generations of Faith. And there's a curiosity, a healthy curiosity. People want to know, what is this that this group gets together on Sunday afternoon and talks about this? And then they come out of there energized and can interact with other people about the faith.
Dr. Brozich, if you could talk to us about your experience and exactly what the bishop was referring to, how important it is, and how they become actually engrossed in this whole relearning about the faith, and in turn become witnesses to the faith.
I have been able to see over the years, especially men who sometimes have a difficult time sharing their faith versus some of the female in the community. They're usually the nurturers of the faith in the families, and I've been able to see where men have been able to get up in front of our entire group and share their stories and their faith walks and be moved to tears. And I've seen people that we've invited to share their faith in regards to the sacrament of marriage, a couple that was married 50 years. And to see this gentleman speaking about the love he has for his wife after 50 years and get a lump in his throat and talking about the love and the things that they have been together. That has been such a witness to the adults as well as the children to see this dynamic of genuine God's love present in our midst, and we could never duplicate those kinds of experiences for them, no matter what we try to attempt. That genuine caring that is shown there, and God's presence in the community among us is what really has transformed so many people.
The one thing that I'd like to pick up on is that the bishop mentioned the word example, and how in this whole process of Generations of Faith, it allows the opportunity to be examples. For example, and I'm not knocking CCD by no means, but by bringing families together, children get to see their parents as examples, as people who are actually learning more about the faith, about going to church, and how important that is that they have examples nowadays. Has that been your experience as well?
Well, very much so. the children, even in regards to prayer, where we had different styles of prayer in which they've engaged in as a family, where they would pray for one another, where parents would pray for their children, and then we would take turns for the children praying for their parents, giving them hands-on experiences of praying so that they can, again, adapt this at their home environment, and giving them resource materials to attempt that during the off hours so that we wouldn't have them in our sessions. And encouraging that and giving them a broader base to experience that, as well as rote prayer and different standardized prayers in the church that we, in our traditional maybe CCD forums or other settings, would not be able to offer Stations of the Cross where they would experience that, and where we've either had the youth ministry age students provide that for us during maybe a Lenten time, or where we would have families take a role in being involved in sharing that. So those kinds of things are very, very important to share those, where they would not be able to have that in another setting, as well as benediction and the adoration of the sacrament, where when we're talking about Eucharist and all that, to take that time out to give them that quiet prayer time, and teaching them as a family to be still and listen for God in their life. And as hectic as life is now, that's something I've really seen transformed. And when we closed down to pray, or started to pray at the very beginning of the sessions, everyone would get quiet. Even the little 4-year-olds, there's 150 people in the hall, and I would call them to prayer, and you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
That is just amazing, seeing that kind of thing happen.
Dr. Brozich, thank you very much for being with us, and thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
The Bishop's Corner is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your host has been Bishop George Murray, and your moderator was Father Jim Corda.